Welcome back, everybody. We are here. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to go?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
We are here for round 4. We have Anthony Rossano and Stefan Mott. And Stefan, I think, is someone who is very interesting, while Anthony is someone that is a little bit more well-established. So if you want to break down both of those for us.
Anthony Rossano, one of our favorite New York locals, very much known for bringing the sauce to his tournament runs. Back in 2015, very notable for going with some Scarf, Smeargle, Low Punny, Confusion, and Dark Void strats. At one time, he was known for running some evasion stuff. The type of unconventional Pokemon that consistent players try to avoid. Anthony making it work for himself. On the other side, we actually have a relatively newer player to VGC, Stefan Mott, who actually is pretty established in StarCraft, letting us know you can actually check out his Twitter. I think he did end up retweeting the Liberty Garden stream. So we're about to get into this match. I always love seeing when people are newer to the game but have experience in other esports because they always tend to bring like a very unique take to how they're going to end up, overcoming their opponent. I think they'll have the teams pulled up in just a moment.
One thing that's interesting with this tournament is the amount of new players that have really interesting esports background in other games. So obviously being a professional StarCraft player is one thing for Stefan, but Dylan Clark yesterday, the professional Smash player.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of different people coming into VGC that have an esports background that may translate in certain ways. Dylan said for him it's a lot of preparation is what translates from Smash to VGC. And I don't know a whole lot about StarCraft personally, but I'm sure there's a lot of aspects that can help someone who's trying to get into the mindset of playing in VGC competitively.
I think that's funny because StarCraft and Pokemon there's one element of them that they might be the exact opposite ends of the spectrum in, and that StarCraft has the highest APM, which stands for actions per minute, in almost all of esports, and then VGC, which if considered an esport, probably has the lowest APM in terms of actions per minute. But the ability to, comb through what your process is, how you're going to approach it as a strategy, and, figure out how you're going to navigate your opponent's what they're doing on their side. I think that still all transitions and crosses over. I do think that I love seeing, StarCraft requires a very a fast thought process. You need to be able to make very quick decisions and execute with clicks and with with keyboard strokes. So I think that, in Pokemon, having to do less actually benefits you if you have a background in doing, very heavy analysis very quickly, because you can, make decisions that you can come to conclusions of how you want to play your board much faster. So we are actually going to get into the match now, and we have the teams on screen.
Yeah, Stefan's team has Togekiss, Rotom Wash, Whimsicott, and Corviknight, Excadrill, and Grimmsnarl, while Anthony's team has Bisharp, Ludicolo, Pelipper, Durant, Berserker, and Aegislash. And so that, for me, that Berserker is really standing out.
Berserker has a very low speed stat, but one thing that I really like about Anthony's Rossano's team here is, he's got the whole U.S. Steel, 4 Steel types here. I was trying to make a joke about, what's the guy's name? It's not, no, can't think of the name. I tried. I can't remember his name. But anyway, so we have some teams on here. 4 Steel types in Rain mode. I think that's actually going to lend itself very well against Whimsicott and Excadrill on Stefan's side. But Grimmsnarl actually having the ability to lower the speed with something like Thunder Wave, and maybe even reduce the damage output of something like a Durant with possible Light Screen or Reflect. So I like the physical special split from Anthony's side there. You have the Aegislash, which tends to run special, and then the Rain mode, and the rest seems to be pretty physical. But we're about to get into this game right now. I'm excited to see what these players bring to the table.
Yeah, the lead should be coming out momentarily here. So one thing I'm interested to see as well is Stefan doesn't really look like he has a whole lot of fire-type move options, maybe only that Togekiss, but coupled with a Rain team on Anthony's side, he might be able to really help with those weaknesses that Steel types can have. Stefan leading here with that Togekiss and Excadrill, which has Mold Breaker, Berserker for Anthony along with Durant, Berserker holding an Air Balloon, so some really interesting stuff already. Mold Breaker, I think, is going to be really helpful for Stefan, possibly trying to avoid something like, I guess Levitate was something more I consider. You see a lot more Mold Breaker against teams that will have opposing Rotoms or something like that to help take that Levitate damage away.
Excadrill is one of the best, Mold Breaker Excadrill is one of the best actual answers to something like a Rotom Wash, because there aren't very many good grass types in this format. But on Anthony's side, we have the Carnegie special with the 2 Steel types. It just
Dale
came
Carnegie.
to me. I know, I was thinking about it.
Andrew Carnegie, my bad. All right, so let's see here. We are going for a Dynamax turn 1, and that is going to be the Dynamax. There we go, the Dynamax Durant, which is what I had assumed, but I didn't want to make that call. Durant, of course, being a real powerhouse, wanting to come out turn 1, wanting to Dynamax, be the fastest Pokemon on the field, so that is going to be able to put out a ton of damage here. Depends on if Stefan actually goes for a Dynamax this turn, which he does, so that could either be the Dynamax Togekiss or the Dynamax Rotom Wash, both of which
the
are...
Rotom Wash switched in, so it is actually going to be the Togekiss.
Oh, it is the Togekiss, right, you're correct, because we saw the Excadrill first. So that Togekiss Dynamax, so an offensive Togekiss here. If it is something that is looking maybe holding more of a Scope Lens, it's not going to take a Max Steel Spike from that Durant comfortably like it would if it was holding up a Berry Berry.
I'm actually surprised to see him end up going for the Max Togekiss. I would imagine maybe he has something like that Babiri Berry that you mentioned, and maybe a Max Flare?
It is that Babiri Berry, yeah, and that Fake Out went into the Rotom that swapped in, so that is not going to really be doing anything because that Rotom wasn't going to attack anyway. That is a massive amount of damage, though, even with that Babiri Berry just holding on with less than 25% of its health. A crit from the Durant. That is a ton of damage into that Togekiss, raising the defense stat for both the Berserker and the Durant.
Yeah, and honestly, that crit was super unfortunate for Stefan. The one thing you want out of your Dynamax turns is you want to be able to fire off 3 Max moves. With the Max Flare going to the Durant, will pick up the knockout, means that he actually doesn't have to focus too much on outvaluing with his Dynamax because he will actually get a second Max turn, whereas Anthony will not. I do actually really like that play there from Stefan. That is one of those things that may only work once. Even though Anthony does have access to 4 Steel types on his team, I think it's really impressive that Stefan said, I don't really care that you have 4 Steel types, I'm Dynamaxing my Togekiss.
Yeah, and it should be interesting if he swaps in something like, you know, a Pelipper, maybe trying to change the rain. Ludicolo in here, not, you know, Ludicolo not going to be able to go as fast as it would like to because it doesn't have any rain supporting it at the moment. And Anthony, of course, already spending his Dynamax, so he wouldn't be able to set up rain unless he brings in something like that Pelipper. And Togekiss here actually being able to hang on. I do think it's interesting that he Dynamaxed with the Babiri Berry, you know, helped him hang on with all of that damage and get rid of that Durant, which doesn't like to just get knocked out turn 1. It likes to take a couple quick knockouts so that you can put yourself in a better end game.
Ludicolo actually coming in here is really fantastic for Anthony. I think this is a really solid play because Togekiss got, you know, the critical hit there. It's going to impact how he finishes this game out. When you look at the things on the field, I mean, Rotom Wash, Togekiss, Excadrill, there's not much that Ludicolo can't hit for super effective damage. And if he switches in the rain, the dynamic speed will allow him to outspeed the Togekiss and possibly just clean this game up. Because, I mean, if it has something like an Assault Vest, it's not going to be able to take too much damage from a Rotom Wash.
Just like you said, that Pelipper swaps in with the Drizzle, so now the Ludicolo is going to be faster, but the Ice Beam going into a Max Guard from that Dynamax Togekiss, while Rotom Wash gets a nasty plot up, so going to be boosting its special attack 2 stages. A new move that Rotom Wash actually gets in this generation, which has been really beneficial. Like you said, though, now that those dynamic speed changes, that Ludicolo is going to be moving faster because Togekiss was not able to get up a Max Airstream at all during its Dynamax turns, and we haven't seen possibly a Whimsicott to send out something like a Tailwind.
Ludicolo can still go right into Togekiss, and unless it maybe successfully gets off a second Max Guard, it will be able to knock out the Togekiss. The Rotom, you know, as I said before, isn't going to be able to do too much to what would be usually they run Assault Vest on Ludicolo. So even with the nasty plot, I don't know that it's going to be able to do too much damage and prevent this Ludicolo from sweeping through.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt here looks like it's going to be going into that Ludicolo. With that nasty plot, still does over half of the health. Pelipper here going for a Tailwind, so Anthony boosting his speed even more, knowing that, you know, if he swaps that Ludicolo off, he's still going to be faster than anything Stefan could send in at the moment. That Pelipper, of course, one of the Pokemon that uses Tailwind that we don't see a whole lot using it unless you're on a pretty specific rain-built team.
Yeah, and one thing coming in here is going to be the Corviknight. Having flying moves is super important for matching up against the Ludicolo. It actually has pretty good, significant bulk. You can obviously see it has a pretty high HP stat there. There's no way for the Ludicolo to get 2 knockouts here. There's a chance that he might just go for the Rotom so that he doesn't have to worry about the boosting element of it. But Corviknight also has the option to go for something like a bulk up and then threaten with Body Press. So considering the composition of Anthony's team, he may want to do something to prevent that.
Yeah, that Rotom going for that Protect this turn, not going to be taking any damage. Ludicolo going for the Hydro Pump, missing that Corviknight, while Pelipper also goes for the Hydro Pump, so it looks like a double Hydro Pump target, possibly hoping to avoid any of the misses, maybe go for that 2-hit knockout. Brave Bird from Corviknight here, now going into what I presume the Ludicolo slot. Yes, that is going to be enough for the knockout, going to take a little bit of recoil damage there, bringing that Corviknight down just a lot lower than it was when it started this turn.
It would have actually gotten knocked out by the 2 Hydro Pumps, so a little bit of retribution there from the Corviknight, paying him back for the critical hit from the Durant earlier. I do think that actually really significantly impacted Stefan's game plan, so getting that little bit of justice there is nice. The Berserker, though, obviously having access to Fake Out means that it's going to be able to come in, and since that Rotom Wash just protected, might be able to start whittling away at its pretty low HP stat. While the Corviknight does, offer pressure with something like a possible Roost, or even setting its own Tailwind. I do think that Anthony is just, kind of a little bit on the back foot there. That turn actually really impacted him. Still an excellent play to double into the Corviknight. That was the correct call.
Yeah, Berserker going for that fake out into the Rotom, while Hydro Pump from Pelipper going into the Corviknight here. That should be enough to get the knockout, and it is. So that Rotom Wash not going to be able to send out something like a Thunderbolt that would be 4 times super effective into that Pelipper.
Yeah, and it's really just going to come down to how the Rotom Wash and the Berserker might end up finishing off each other in the end game there, because the Excadrill will most likely go down to anything that the Pelipper ends up attacking into it. That does draw a little bit of pressure into it. Because the Berserker is weak to the Excadrill, he might want to go for something like a high horsepower into the Berserker. But Mold Breaker Excadrill actually tend to usually run something like Life Orb or boosting items as opposed to a Focus Sash. So it is a kind of a tricky situation. Stefan, though, has been playing his pieces exceptionally, and I do like the way that he's been, holding his board position, kind of showing the RTS element of his gameplay.
The Excadrill here going for the Protect on this turn, possibly trying to see the Pelipper going for the Hydro Pump into the Rotom Wash, so definitely a call there, possibly assuming the Protect, trying to get rid of this Rotom that can absolutely take out this Pelipper with a Thunderbolt. It eats its berry, though, after being down to less than 25% of its health. Going to regain a little bit of its health there, almost up to half. Iron Head here also going into the Rotom. That is not enough to knock it out, but had there not been a berry, it would have been. Hydro Pump here going into the Berserker, so not worrying about that Pelipper at this point. That is enough to knock the Berserker out. That is just going to leave the Pelipper against both of Stefan's Pokemon.
And now the Tailwind is at risk of running out next turn, so Anthony kind of, not possibly... Oh, at this turn, my bad. So the Pelipper not, possibly poised to actually knock out the Excadrill before it gets hit by something like a Rock Slide. A lot of them will tend to run something like a Focus Sash, so there is a chance that he might actually be able to clutch this game out. But we're going to have to see.
Goes for the Iron Head here, possibly looking for a flinch from this Pelipper. The Rotom goes for the Thunderbolt, so if that is enough to knock it out, that is going to be the game for Stefan, and it is. So Stefan takes this game 1. So that is a great turnaround from Stefan from a position that I thought was a little bit more difficult for him to get the game from.
Yeah, I think that the Hydro Pump miss actually ended up being super impactful. I don't know necessarily that the Togekiss may have been able to survive a double up from the Ludicolo and the Pelipper if it was able to get a Tailwind off. But considering the way that Stefan kind of, maneuvered that end game, there's a couple things I want to take away from that. One, Stefan actually didn't go for Iron Head, didn't go for Rock Slide into that Pelipper slot, which means that he may have just been trying to get the consistent damage to break a possible Focus Sash, which is pretty smart play in my opinion, or might not even have access to Rock Slide. So that's something that Anthony's going to have to keep in mind. I do also want to point out that Anthony made excellent plays that whole game.
Yeah.
Definitely just hard calling every Protect that Stefan went for. So I do think that possibly it's one of the adjustments that Anthony might need to make is that he may want to go into a Dynamax Ludicolo mode if he can possibly get that off. I think that the Durant didn't actually do too much, and knowing that it's a Babiri Togekiss means that the Togekiss is a little bit less threatened by the Durant. He'd need to either proc the Babiri with another one of his steel types, which he's not sparing any on, and then, or he would have to set it up where he can knock the Togekiss out maybe a turn after it goes for Dynamax. And that's kind of one of those strategies where if you know how to, maneuver yourself around your opponent's Dynamax, you can capitalize on yours even better. So like possibly waiting for one turn of theirs to be burned, even max guarding, whatever you need to do to keep your Pokemon alive. I do want to see if Stefan opts to bring any of his support Pokemon. If you noticed in the last game, he actually chose not to bring Whimsicott or Grimmsnarl. I don't know if it's because he feels he doesn't need the support. His Pokemon just match up, promptly, or if he thinks that just based off the composition of Anthony's team, it just wouldn't be as effective.
That was something I noticed as well and definitely wanted to bring up, is that Stefan seemed to go full offense that entire game. He didn't really use any setup moves at all. No like Tailwind or anything on his side. Not having the Grimmsnarl or the Whimsicott, something like a Fake Out or a Speed Control and Paralysis with Thunder Wave. It seemed like he just kind of wanted to go full offensive pressure right from the get-go and just keep that pressure the entire game.
Yeah, and the knockout on the Durant was huge. I wonder if this game Anthony's going to play a little bit differently. I think that he was making the plays he needed to, even after losing that Durant. So I'd like to see him a little bit in the driver's seat.
Yeah, the leads now are going to be here for Game 2. Anthony going for that Ludicolo and Pelipper, while Stefan going for the Rotom Wash and Togekiss again. So the similar lead from Stefan, but Anthony here really changing it up, not bringing that Durant turn 1, letting the rain get up, possibly, like you said, going for something like a Dynamax Ludicolo, which I think would be really much more beneficial for him than his Game 1 choice.
Yeah, and the cool thing here is that Anthony immediately wanted to give his Ludicolo the speed boost with the rain, possibly wanting to get the Pelipper in there so that he can set the rain and then switch it out to protect it for later. But the problem for the Ludicolo is that even after Dynamaxing, it still takes a large chunk of damage if it gets max airstreamed. So Togekiss being on the field immediately is a little bit threatening. It might be up to Anthony whether or not he wants to try and take out the rest of the Pokemon surrounding the Togekiss, maybe trying to endure a couple of those airstreams. But I do think that having a speed advantage is super important right now. Maybe setting everything else up in the game for, putting it into Sucker Punch range with something like a Bisharp.
Yeah, Stefan going for that Dynamax here. Should be that Dynamax Togekiss again, if I am not mistaken. And it is. So that is going to be, again, like that offensive pressure that we saw last time that Togekiss has, but still holding that Babiri Berry. So against the 4 steel types on Anthony's team, it definitely sits a little bit more comfortably than, say, a Scope Lens Togekiss would. While we see no Dynamax come out from Anthony's side, Ludicolo going for the fake out onto the Rotom, so calling that properly without a switch in. And the Pelipper here going for a Tailwind, so not only having the boost from the rain, the Tailwind as well going to be boosting the speed, making the Togekiss still faster though, faster than this Ludicolo. That is going to be almost a one-hit knockout on that Pelipper with that max airstream, boosting the speed again on Stefan's side.
There's something that Anthony did really smart there. He recognized that Stefan wasn't immediately addressing threats. He was kind of trying to play into more aggressive positions, and by doing that he countered that aggression with his own very I would say confident play and leaving the Ludicolo on the field, risking losing it, especially when Rotom Wash even gave him so much trouble. I want to say that there's a lot of machismo behind that that whole decision there, and I actually really like it. The problem though is that with Ludicolo still being on the field, there isn't too much damage that it's going to be able to get down into that Togekiss. Togekiss is very specially defensive, so even opting to max the Ludicolo here might not be the most effective way to finish this Togekiss off.
Yeah, but we did see earlier that it does have a move that is super effective on the Togekiss, so it is, that Ice Beam. So that should be able to possibly do a decent chunk to that Togekiss, knowing it's not something like a weakness policy now, knowing that he wouldn't boost it. Going for a Max Geyser here, boosted with the rain though, into that Togekiss slot, and that is going to do over half damage, so that is still a massive chunk of damage here. That is a critical hit. That makes a little bit more sense. Hurricane here going into the Togekiss as well, bringing it down into the red, gets the confusion. That is going to be massive for Anthony.
True to form, Rossano.
The Thunderbolt here going into the Pelipper, that is enough to knock it out, but not before that Pelipper was able to get a massive confusion off into Stefan's Dynamax Togekiss. And we are going to see if it is able to get an attack off here. Is it? It is. It is able to get that max airstream off into the Ludicolo, and that is still going to do just above half health there. So fighting through that confusion, not taking any extra damage to itself, boosting the speed on Stefan's side of the field once more.
And that's one of those things where we're seeing the impacting nature of it. Well, we're going to see the impact of a team building decision by going for a Babiri Togekiss instead of going for something like a Scope Lens. He wasn't able to go for the critical hit there, and actually didn't even do that much damage to the Dynamax Ludicolo. So I'm wondering if Anthony actually has some bulk into that guy. Bisharp coming out here means that he threatens something like a Sucker Punch into the Togekiss. Being resisted with a Fairy type means that I don't know that we'll get the knockout, but thanks to the help of that critical hit, it is relatively close to the end of its HP. Considering the way that Dynamax mechanics work, you need to think about how much HP it has when doubled. How much HP would Sucker Punch from a Bisharp do to an actual Togekiss in that situation if it wasn't Dynamax?
There is no Sucker Punch here, though. Ludicolo going straight for a max overgrowth into that Rotom Wash, and that is enough to get the knockout here. While of course, no Sucker Punch from that Bisharp, like you said.
You might be electing to Iron Head.
Might be electing to Iron Head, possibly going for something that is, 100% if it's, an attack. We didn't see a Max Guard there, possibly baiting out. The Iron Head here goes into the Togekiss, eating that Babiri Berry, so, of course, we'll have to see if that does enough damage through it, and that is not enough. It brings it down to just 11 HP.
Survives.
So that is really close. If it does not live through this confusion, though, that is going to be massive. It is able to get that max airstream up onto the Ludicolo, though, so not getting hurt from its own confusion and still boosting the speed a whole nother time for this Togekiss, which probably only has a turn left to live at best.
Yeah, and it being confused is actually really huge there because Togekiss now has to run the risk of maybe even getting a max guard off, but it is at +2. If it is able to go for a max guard, then it does stay in prime position to you know, stay healthy and maybe go for something like a Dazzling Gleam after the Tailwind runs out on Anthony's side. But as I was talking about before, Bisharp does have Sucker Punch pressure, so it's going to be up to Stefan to maybe try and get the a body press off into that Bisharp and knock it off the field now. The problem is that we didn't see the Focus Sash proc from the Pelipper, so it does even, you know, carry the pressure of possibly carrying having a Focus Sash itself from the Bisharp. So I wonder if this stuff is going through Stefan's head. As I said, he's a little bit newer in this situation, but, you know, being, you know, an esports player from a different field, he might be considering all these possibilities. His thought process is pretty quick, I'm sure.
Yeah, one thing that I think might be tough, though, is because the rain is still going and Togekiss wasn't able to get up something like a Max Flare, if it wanted to get any massive amount of damage off with whatever Fire-type move it has onto the Bisharp, if it could fight through this Confusion, we will have to see, though. It is able to fight through the Confusion. Again, no issues with Confusion this game. Togekiss very level-headed right now, able to get that Follow Me up, able to take this Max Geyser so that Corviknight doesn't have to. So that is still going to, you know, end the Togekiss here, but able to create a bit of a diversion, allow its Corviknight to take a big Max move like that.
Yeah, and this is kind of one of the things that I had a little bit of a problem with when it came to Rossano's composition. There's not many ways for him to actually punch that Corviknight very well, and now that it's going for a substitute, it's going to be even more difficult to remove from the field, while still probably having the ability to knock out the Ludicolo, maybe even the Bisharp. That substitute does indicate that, you know, with the lefties, it doesn't have a way to... it might be lacking an extra move coverage, something like a body press. So that may be, you know, crucial to the way that he plays the end game here.
Excadrill coming in, that is going to be Stefan's last Pokemon. So there's still one Pokemon on Anthony's side that we don't know what it is yet. However, the Tailwind ran out for Anthony's side, and Ludicolo's Dynamax turns are now over. So it is now basically a pretty standard match, no extra additions on speed because both of the Pokemon on Stefan's side weren't able to benefit from those max airstreams that the Togekiss threw out earlier.
Yeah, and I think that based on the way that, you know, Stefan had won that first game, now that Pelipper's off the field, we know that Bisharp and Ludicolo are here, but Ludicolo is kind of reduced to, you know, half of what its health had. So, I mean, if he can play this Corviknight right, it might be, you know, Stefan might be poised to take this set.
The Sucker Punch going into that substitute Corviknight, able to knock it out there while the Excadrill went for a Protect. So if this Hydro Pump, a good call there from Anthony again, going for that Hydro Pump into the Corviknight, able to take a massive amount of damage. No burn though. Brave Bird here from the Corviknight, possibly going into that Ludicolo, which it is. That should be enough to knock it out, but it might be able to knock itself out in the process with that recoil damage. So we are going to have to see exactly how much.
It might live on one. I think it might live on one.
It lives on, I think, a 7 HP, so that is just there, just barely. However, that is... and able to get some of that HP back from its leftovers. However, that Excadrill took a Protect that it really didn't need to. It could have absolutely, I mean, a much safer play, but had it gone for something, you know, maybe like a Rock Slide or maybe taken advantage.
That indicates to me that the Excadrill, once again, probably isn't carrying something like a Focus Sash, because this is one of those situations where Excadrill is threatened by the Ludicolo. And Anthony, you know, kind of really flexing here. I think that he was managed to get the damage down to that Corviknight exactly when he needed to, right before he lost his Ludicolo. So, you know, fortunate that it was able to connect an 80% move. Very big here. But now Berserker comes in with Fake Out pressure into that Excadrill. If Corviknight doesn't have a way to do enough damage to this Bisharp, he might be taking a lot into his Excadrill slot.
The fail for the Protect, or sorry, the Protect there was failed from Stefan's side. The Fake Out going into the Excadrill, not able to do anything, while the Sucker Punch also fails, while a Roost here from Corviknight able to bring some of that health back. So one thing too, knowing that Berserker has an Air Balloon, there isn't really going to be a way for, say, Excadrill with something like a high horsepower to hit it until that Air Balloon is knocked out.
I'm wondering if he didn't have a way to actually dish out a Dark move into the Excadrill, because if there was another move, he could have gone for something like an Assurance, or maybe even... I don't know that Bisharp even actually has access to knock off this generation. I think it doesn't. So maybe going for, yeah, something like an Assurance there might have been a good play, but letting the Corviknight get a Roost is actually really huge and actually makes Stefan's chances of winning this game look really good.
A Protect here from the Bisharp, but a Rock Slide from the Excadrill going onto both of these Pokemon, so not hitting that protected Bisharp. However, going into the Berserker, that is going to knock that Air Balloon, so it is going to be able to possibly take a Grounded type move next turn, while an Ironhead going into the Excadrill from Anthony's Berserker. Corviknight going for a bulk up, so Corviknight here sitting really comfortably now, getting that bulk up after getting a Roost last turn, boosting its attack and defense, making it a lot more threatening for Stefan's side.
Yeah, and one thing I wonder if Stefan is going to have the awareness to do, as I said, being a little bit newer, is that there's a chance that this game might end up going closer to the timer than most you'd see. Now that he was able to actually proc that Air Balloon, I do think that the Excadrill is in position to be able to go for something like an Earthquake and knock out both Pokemon on Rossano's side. However, a lot of these Pokemon a lot of the Excadrills will tend to carry high horsepower, so he probably doesn't have a way to knock out both at the same time. So it's probably going to come down to a late game Berserker and Corviknight if he can take the Bisharp off the field right here.
Yeah, and let's hope so. If there is a Sucker Punch here, the Bisharp is going for that Sucker Punch into the Excadrill. That is almost enough to knock it out, while the high horsepower here goes into that Bisharp, and that is a one-hit knockout. So now it is only Berserker with the Excadrill and the Corviknight. So if Berserker here goes for a taunt, so that is a taunt into the Corviknight, not going to be able to do something like a Roost or a Bulk Up or a Substitute again. So now the Corviknight is only going to be locked into Brave Bird, so it is going to be taking damage to itself every time it puts damage on that Berserker slot.
Berserker being faster than the Corviknight actually is very important information. It's so good that Stefan's Excadrill didn't get knocked out there. I don't know that the Berserker has any other type of move that can do priority to the Excadrill. It might also be carrying Sucker Punch. I don't know if it actually gets it. But Excadrill are going to go for Protect here. Very smart play to preserve that little sliver of HP and maybe scout out a Sucker Punch.
It goes for the Iron Head here, so no Sucker Punch there or anything like that. The Brave Bird, of course, going in like we expected. We will have to see how much that actually does. That does a pretty decent, about 25% of Berserker's HP. Going to take its own recoil damage, but of course regain some of that back with the leftovers. So now that Corviknight's going to be locked into that Brave Bird, Anthony can kind of see how much damage he's going to have to take, you know, if this does go to timer, and it is, you know, about percentage of HP that both of your Pokemon have.
If Excadrill connects the higher horsepower here, that'll end up being game, and that'll actually be a really well-played set by our new face, Stefan Mott here. It's excellent to have him showing off what the transition from a different esport can do. Anthony, once again, as I said, you know, one of those locals that usually tends to bring the spicier stuff. I really do think one of the downfalls of that team composition was it didn't have a way to deal too much damage to something like a Corviknight. And I don't really have a problem with that in theory. Corviknight isn't the highest usage Pokemon, but it's one of those Pokemon where if it does have, you know, a more bulky set with Roost, Bulk Up, it will do a lot to stay on the board, and exactly like displayed will show you why it can be a great win condition. But we're actually going to be bringing in our new face, Stefan, into the interview booth, and we will be doing the analyst desk right after. So thank you for joining us and watching our round 4. It was a pleasure, Maeve.
Thank you. It was also a pleasure for me.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Liberty Garden Midseason Showdown, Day 2. I'm here with Stefan Mott, our Round 4 champion. I'm just going to ask him a couple questions. So, Stefan, going into that game, you see a rain team, first of all. A rain team, rain not exactly the most common weather archetype in this format, combined with 4 steel types, 3 of those steel types being Berserker, Aegislash, and Bisharp. 3 Pokemon that, you know, have seen some success in the past, well, at least not in Berserker's case, but stuff like Aegislash and Bisharp, steel types from formats past, but definitely uncommon choices in this VGC 20 metagame. How did you approach this matchup?
So you said it's a rain team, and like you're right, it is.
It has a rain mode.
But for me, that was a steel team. Like you mentioned the 4 steel types. It's weird because I don't have a fantastic answer to steel, but like steel isn't particularly strong against against like the team I brought. Obviously, I have 3 fairies, so it can be risky,
Right.
but I didn't bring Whimsicott or Grimmsnarl. But it was really uncomfortable because I was talking about this with one of my friends earlier. I feel really awkward opening the same team 2 games in a row. Like, not even just the same 2, but like bringing the same 4. It just feels like I should be thinking more, but that many steel types really just kind of prevents me from bringing more than 1 fairy, obviously, because, you know, Grimmsnarl just kind of dies.
Yeah.
And then with Berserker there as well, boosting the steel type moves, it's really, really scary. Initially, I was not, because I don't think I've ever played against a Berserker. So that was one of those moments where when I Dynamaxed my Togekiss game 1, I didn't know if I was going to live with the Babbery Berry against the Durant, because obviously Durant is very, very strong.
Right.
But yeah, very, very uncomfortable team. I'm like pretty new, so it's been like a little much for me to just learn all the mons that are in the meta and like what their stat spreads are. So when I run into something like Berserker, I don't know what that stat spread is. So like I probably could have killed him in game 2 with just a high horsepower at the end there, but like I actually don't know what that thing's defense is, which is why I went for the Brave Bird and the Protect first, because like, I just don't know what that thing does.
Yeah.
So it was very uncomfortable for sure.
Yeah, it definitely shakes up your game plan, especially when you're approaching Pokemon in matchups that you don't exactly face often. Like, I remember I was over here looking at your match, and I was like, what does Berserker's ability do? That's Steely Spirit. Fun fact, it raises the power of Steel-type moves 50% for your allies. So
I didn't even know it was 50%.
Yeah,
I thought
50%.
it was,
I was pretty
a lot.
I was pretty shocked when I saw that, too. But you say you're quite new, but you do have that esports background, a StarCraft player. So, you know, something that I just want to sort of ask you about is that so when you're switching over to a game like Pokemon, you're switching over from a game that has requires you to make a ton of actions per minute, and just I'd say like StarCraft and Pokemon have a similar element in that it's a lot of resource management, but the speed that you're making those decisions and the way that you do make those decisions and manage those different resources, how do you approach a game of Pokemon somewhat differently than a game like StarCraft? Or like what also sort of drew you to VGC in the first place?
So I'm like so to answer that part first, I'm a huge Pokemon fan. I've been a Pokemon speedrunner for about 5 years.
Okay.
So
yeah, I saw in your Twitter bio that you have a couple world records.
Not in Pokemon games.
Okay, I was about to say in Pokemon
those
games.
Those are for another day, but not in Pokemon games. But so it's interesting because StarCraft 2 has the vast majority of players who are like pretty good at StarCraft 2, like like low to mid Grandmaster players, which is where I am right now. They're like very, very good with their mechanics. They're very good at actually like doing the things they're supposed to, but a lot of them don't really think. So I consider myself kind of a cerebral StarCraft player where like my mechanics are on a lower level than a lot of the players that I play against. But like a lot of my whole game plan is like planned out in advance. It's based on mind games. So I think that really carries over with VGC, which is really, really nice. And I kind of try to approach the game in a similar way where, because StarCraft you have build orders, and for those of you who don't like know anything about RTS out there, like you basically have a plan and a roadmap for the first few minutes of the game. So I kind of try to do that with VGC as well, where it's like I have a mental spreadsheet of like, or flowchart I guess, of like, all right, my opponent is opening Gmax, Charizard, and Whimsicott or whatever. Like this is my game plan for that. This is what I'll plan for turn 2, provided that like I'm allowed to, I'm able to, and that kind of carries over as well. So I think just based on the way I play StarCraft, I have a little bit more of a skill set that overlaps, which benefits. But if anything, the experience with Pokemon speedrunning, obviously, I would say has more bearing because, you know, that's with speedrunning, you're already getting used to sort of doing damage calcs and getting used to like damage ranges and knowing generally what a lot of the moves are, because that's something that a lot of people who have been playing Pokemon for a long time can kind of forget, that there's a lot of moves that you need to remember.
Yeah, I know. From the Pokemon speedruns that I watch, there's a ton of knowledge that goes into the speedruns because you know, Pokemon has an element of RNG into it, so you have to know specifically, okay, when is it my optimal play in this particular scenario if X happens?
Exactly.
So like there's a ton of different variables and a ton of different mechanics and values that you need to know. So that's sort of, I guess you're sort of used to that overload of information being necessary
a little
for a competitive game. So you played yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you finished 4-3 yesterday.
In both tournaments.
Yeah, in both tournaments. Just unfortunately missing out on CP at the mid-season yesterday.
Yep.
You're now 4-0 in Swiss today and also 8-0 in games.
Yes.
So you're on a really good streak today.
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
So yesterday was a little sad because I was 4-2 after 6 rounds in both tournaments. So I was really playing for CP in the last tournaments, and I got a little bit unlucky, and it is part of the game. But it's a little bit hard when you finish the day and like both of the tournaments there was some element of RNG involved in the last game, and it feels a little bit bad. But yeah, I didn't expect to be 4-0, especially 8-0 in games, and especially like this was a weird trend yesterday too. This game is a good example of a game where I went in and I looked at team preview and I went, I'm going to lose very easily. I don't know what this team does.
I don't
know
games?
what to do. Yes.
Oh.
And the weird trend is that every time I have that thought going into game 1, I win 2-0. And it's very weird.
You start having more confidence in yourself, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like I kind of feel like the whole general idea is that I feel like I'm being realistic, but apparently not.
I mean, you're not going to win with that attitude. So I mean,
apparently I am though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it must be working for you, but very unorthodox mindset for sure. But,
yeah.
I mean, you're obviously doing very well. You're 4-0 right now on a good pace, but. Yeah, before we wrap up, any shout-outs or last things you want to say on stream?
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be on stream, so I'm not wearing a team jersey, but I'd like to shout out my team, Psystorm Gaming. They don't sponsor me as a VGC player, but they did send me to Dallas, which was kind of cool, so everyone go give Psystorm Gaming some love. And yeah, just a shout-out to my friend Gino, Thomas McCarr. He's playing as well. He's been a very, very big help to sort of help out with all of my teams since I started playing. He's a lot more knowledgeable than I am, so he's essentially my repository of information that I go to. And a shout out to Jacario as well, who's been super helpful in just playing best of threes with me, helping me find people to play best of threes with. And shout out to Necra as well, who's just been instrumental in introducing me to people, which has helped me just a lot in actually getting to a point where I can be sitting here right now, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, shout outs to all those folks, and hopefully I can continue to do well for them.
Really good stuff. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with some analyst desk content for this round. We do have a bit of a longer round for this round due to a lunch break, but we'll be back with some analyst desk stuff. And right after that, actually, we're doing a caster battle, so a bit of a fun treat for you guys in the meantime while we wrap up this longer round. But don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back.